What if everything you've ever been taught about learning a language is, well, completely backwards?
It's a provocative thought, isn't it?
It really is. Because, for so many of us, the spark to learn a new language starts with such great intentions. You picture yourself, I don't know, easily navigating some market overseas, ordering coffee like you belong there.
Or understanding those foreign films without subtitles. That's a big one.
Totally. So you dive in, you get the nice color-coded notebooks, right? You sign up for all the apps that promise fluency like tomorrow.
Oh, yeah, the promises, weekend intensives, blocking out hours every day.
Exactly. You tell yourself, okay, this time, discipline, sheer willpower. You put in the hours grinding through grammar, memorizing lists.
It sounds exhausting just describing it.
It is exhausting. And then months later, sometimes even the year or more of this really hard work, you find you're still stuck. You can barely string basic sentences together.
Yeah. It's a depressingly common story.
And that pronunciation you dreamed of, it feels completely alien in your mouth, like your tongue just won't cooperate.
Right, the sounds feel unnatural.
And the vocabulary. Hundreds, thousands of words you drilled. Oof, gone when you actually need them.
Vanish right when you open your mouth.
But for me personally, the worst bit is that painful internal translation, converting every single thought from English first.
Oh, absolutely. Filtering through rules, word lists in your head.
Before anything comes out. And it creates this awkward, horrible delay in conversation. It's painful for you and probably just as painful for the person you're trying to talk to.
You feel like you're hitting a wall constantly.
Exactly. An invisible, insurmountable wall. And it just makes you wonder, doesn't it? What if all this structure, all this intense studying, this forcing, what if that was the actual problem, not the solution?
What if the methods themselves are the bottleneck?
Precisely. That fundamental doubt, that question.
Yeah.
That's what kicked off the whole journey we're diving into today.
It's a journey into a really different way of thinking about language.
We're going to unpack a method that sounds, honestly, so counterintuitive. Some might even call it lazy. You might raise an eyebrow. Seriously.
Lazy can sound appealing, though, can it?
Right. But it promises real, genuine breakthroughs for learners who feel completely stuck. And we're not just talking theory here. This sounds maybe a bit ridiculous at first glance, I'll admit. But I promise you, it's actually backed by some cutting-edge brain linguistic science. And it's apparently helped thousands of people finally have that aha moment where the language just clicks.
And that's exactly what we're here to explore. We're looking at what we call the neurological alignment method, or as you said, maybe more playfully, the lazy way of mastering languages.
The lazy way. I like it.
And it's more than just a technique, really. It's a whole paradigm shift in how we think about language acquisition. It's designed specifically to work with your brain's natural, innate learning processes.
Instead of fighting against them.
Exactly. Instead of fighting them with traditional methods that, let's be honest, weren't really designed for the kind of spontaneous, fluid communication most of us want.
Right.
But before we jump into the actual techniques, the how-to, it's really, really essential that we understand why. Why do those traditional methods, the ones we all know, the ones that feel so, well, normal, why do they fall so short for so many people?
Okay, so laying the groundwork first.
Yes. Understanding the problem helps us appreciate the solution. It's crucial for seeing why this counterintuitive approach actually gets such effortless results.
Okay, let's definitely unpack that core issue then. To really get it, maybe take a moment, listening and think about how you learned your first language, your native language.
Back when you were a toddler.
Yeah. Did anyone sit you down with flashcards for nouns and verbs? Did they drill you on conjugation tables?
Or make you diagram sentences before you could even speak properly?
Of course not. The idea is just absurd, right? Imagine explaining, I don't know, the past perfect subjunctive to a 2-year-old.
Hey, yeah, that wouldn't go well.
So if we all organically, seemingly without effort, mastered our first language that way, what does that tell us about how we should be learning a second or third language as adults?
It suggests a huge disconnect, doesn't it?
A massive disconnect, a fundamental flaw in how we usually approach it, totally missing how our brains are actually wired for this stuff.
Exactly. You've really nailed the core problem. It's what we call a neurological mismatch. Our brains, from how they developed, how they evolved, they're just not designed to learn language By memorizing isolated grammar rules.
Okay.
Or by studying vocabulary lists that have no connection to the real world. Think about it. Your native tongue, it happened naturally. You were just immersed.
Right, you just picked it up.
You absorbed it through meaningful contexts, things that mattered to you right then and there. You heard a ball while seeing a ball. You heard a run while someone was running.
The connection was obvious. Sound, meaning, experience, all together.
Always embedded in a real situation. There was zero conscious effort to study rules. Your brain was just busy making connections, non-stop of connections.
Okay, so that makes intuitive sense. But what does the science say? The neuroscience bit you mentioned.
Yes, this is where it gets really fascinating. Neuroscience gives us incredible insight into why that natural way works so well and why traditional methods often, well, fail to produce fluency.
Yep.
Research, especially looking at bilingual brains, shows that true fluency, that automatic, effortless speaking and understanding, it's not primarily stored in your declarative memory.
Declarative memory. That's like facts and figures.
Exactly. It's great for facts, dates, phone numbers, historical events, stuff you consciously recall and can spate what you use for an exam.
Got it. Information you declare.
Precisely. But language, as a functional automatic skill, neuroscience shows it lives mainly in the procedural part of the brain.
Procedural, like processes, skills.
Yes, this is so important. It's the same system your brain uses for skills like riding a bike.
Huh. Okay, I see. You don't memorize bike riding rules.
You absolutely don't. You don't learn by reading physics diagrams about balance or lists of pedaling instructions. You learn by doing, by feeling it, adjusting, trying again and again until it becomes automatic. Second nature.
Like typing on a keyboard, too. You don't think about where the keys are.
Perfect example. Your fingers just know. It's an ingrained automatic process. Or playing music you practice, develop muscle memory, it flows. You're not constantly thinking, okay, C sharp now.
Right. It becomes automatic.
Now contrast that with traditional language learning. What does it focus on?
Rules, lists, tables.
Exactly. It targets declarative memory. Grammar rules become facts to memorize. Vocabulary are lists to recall. Conjugations are tables to drill.
Which is good for understanding about the language, maybe.
It can be helpful for analysis, yes. But here's the critical point. That approach is absolutely terrible for developing an automatic, fluid skill, like actually speaking and understanding a language spontaneously.
Because you're constantly trying to access that declarative memory, that database.
Precisely. You end up with that awful internal translation you described. Trying to recall rules, searching for words consciously, instead of just speaking or understanding automatically.
It's like trying to learn swimming by reading a book about it instead of jumping in the pool.
Excellent analogy. So the problem is clear. Traditional methods are essentially fighting your brain's natural wiring for language. They're forcing this square peg of conscious knowledge into the round hole of procedural skill. It creates massive friction.
And very little real flowing progress for many people.
Okay. That makes a lot of sense, actually. So if drilling rules and lists is fighting the brain, what's the alternative? What do we do instead? How do we escape this cycle? Well, this is where it gets really interesting and maybe a little surprising.
Okay, I'm ready. What's the big counterintuitive solution?
The core of the alternative method, the most powerful tool identified for rapid natural acquisition, is television.
Hold on. Television.
Television.
You're serious, watching TV. I have to admit, my first reaction is skepticism. Like major skepticism.
I understand that reaction completely.
How can watching TV possibly be a serious study method? It sounds like, the ultimate procrastination technique. Permission to just veg out on the couch.
And that's a really important clarification to make right away. Because you're right, simply flipping on a foreign film, maybe zoning out with subtitles in your own language, that's not it.
Okay, so it's not just passive watching.
Definitely not. That kind of passive viewing might give you a tiny bit of exposure, maybe, but it's not the strategic method we're talking about. What we're discussing is a strategic visual approach.
Strategic visual approach.
Or you could call it strategic entertainment immersion. It's a deliberate, focused way of using regular entertainment, turning it into an incredibly powerful, brain-friendly language learning tool.
How does that work then? What's the strategic part?
The magic, and it really does feel like magic when you get it, isn't just about hearing the language. It's about how visual storytelling activates different pathways in your brain. It forges direct links between sound and meaning, completely bypassing that clunky, conscious translation step.
So the visuals provide context.
Rich, immediate context. Think about how a baby learns again. No dictionary, just the world. You see a character point to a red apple. They say the word for apple in the target language. Boom. Your brain instantly connects that sound to the object, the color, the action of pointing.
Without me having to think, okay, manzana means apple.
Exactly. It's a direct mapping. Flashcards or grammar drills alone just can't replicate that richness, that multisensory connection. You're not just learning words, you're acquiring concepts, meaning directly in the new language. You're building those neural networks naturally.
Because the brain is good at spotting patterns, and the visuals give it loads of patterns linked to sound.
Precisely. Your brain is a pattern recognition machine, and visual context provides endless patterns to latch onto and make sense of.
So, did the person whose journey inspired this, did they actually do this? Just watch TV?
They absolutely did. They experienced this profound transformation, particularly in their Mandarin speaking and listening, just by doing this. Their commitment was actually quite simple on the surface.
What did they do?
They integrated this strategic entertainment immersion by watching a couple of hours of TV every single day in Mandarin.
A couple of hours a day. Okay, that's a commitment, but...
But here's the kicker. They were already watching a couple of hours of TV every day anyway.
Oh, so they just swapped the language.
Exactly. They just changed what they were watching. And crucially, this wasn't just a little supplement, something extra on top of real studying. This was the studying. This became their primary study method.
Wow, so watching TV was the main study method.
Yes. And the results, as they described them, were astonishing. It effectively rewired their brain to understand and produce Mandarin far more naturally, far more automatically than any amount of textbook work ever had. They talked about this feeling of effortless absorption, like the language was just seeping in without the usual fight.
That's incredible. Swapping something you already do, something enjoyable for traditional study and getting better results, it redefines study.
It completely reframes it.
But surely you can't just watch anything, right? Does the type of TV show matter? Especially when you're starting out.
That's a very important point. Yes, the type of content matters hugely, especially at the beginning. You can't just turn on some complex political drama in your target language on day one and expect miracles.
Right, you'd be lost.
Totally lost and probably very discouraged. There's a specific principle to guide your choices based on how the brain learns best. It's called the comprehension 80-20 rule.
The 80-20 rule.
Yeah.
Like the Pareto principle.
Similar concept, but applied differently here. It's about the level of understanding you have when you watch.
Okay. So what does this 80-20 rule mean for, my viewing habits if I wanted to try this? How do I pick the right shows?
The 80-20 rule is really the cornerstone of making this work effectively. It suggests that you should start with content where you understand about 80% of what's going on.
80%. Okay. But how do I know if I understand 80% if I don't know the language yet?
That's the key. The understanding doesn't have to come purely from the words themselves. It can come from the visuals being really clear, the context of the scene, maybe the character's actions or expressions are really obvious.
So I understand 80% of the meaning or the situation, even if I don't know 80% of the words.
Exactly. You have enough context, enough visual or situational scaffolding to figure out the meaning of the new words and phrases you don't know without feeling completely overwhelmed.
Okay, that makes more sense. Why 80% though? Why not 50% or 95%?
It's about finding that sweet spot, the perfect zone for your brain's natural learning mechanisms. If you understand too little, say only 20%, it just feels like noise. You get frustrated, your brain can't latch onto patterns, and you basically switch off.
Yeah, I can see that. Too hard.
But if you understand 100%, well, you're comfortable, but you're not really learning anything new. You're not challenging your brain.
Not pushing the boundaries.
Right. That 80% zone is dynamic. It keeps your brain actively engaged, inferring meaning for that new 20%, making connections, but without the frustration of being totally lost. It fuels learning without causing burnout. It's like the Goldilocks zone, just right.
Okay. Goldilocks zone for language learning. Got it. Can you give some examples of what kind of content fits that 80% rule when you're starting?
Absolutely. Think about content made for beginners or even young children in the target language.
Yeah.
Animated shows are often fantastic.
Because the visuals are clear and the language is simple.
Exactly. Bright colors, exaggerated actions, simple plots, often lots of repetition. Mini stories with predictable structures are also great. Or even simplified news programs made specifically for language learners. Some broadcasters offer those.
I've seen those. They speak slower, use simpler words.
Yes. And children's shows where a character points to a ball and says ball over and over, that's directly mimicking how we learned as kids.
Yeah.
Super effective for building core vocabulary and context.
Okay, so start simple, maybe even with kids stuff. What about later? How do you progress?
As you get more comfortable, as your understanding grows, you naturally start understanding more. So you can gradually tackle more complex material while still aiming for that rough 80% comprehension of the new stuff you encounter.
So the 80% target stays, but the content gets harder.
Precisely. Our guide, for instance, suggested moving on to things like teen dramas.
Teen dramas.
Yeah, think about it. The plots are often pretty straightforward. Friendship, romance, school issues, universal themes. The emotional context and interactions are usually quite clear, even if some dialogue is tricky.
Okay, I can see that. What else?
Documentaries on topics you already know something about in your own language. Your existing knowledge provides a huge scaffold for understanding the new vocabulary related to that topic.
That's smart. Leveraging what you already know.
And don't underestimate competition shows. Cooking shows, singing contests, reality challenges.
Why those?
Because the actions are almost always directly tied to the dialogue. You see someone chopping vegetables while they explain the recipe. You see a contestant's face fall as the judge gives critique. The visuals provide constant, relevant context.
Ah, okay, so the action explains the words.
Very often, yes. And our guide's journey with Mandarin showed this progression perfectly. They started with really basic animations for beginners, then gradually moved to things they found personally interesting: historical dramas, some reality TV. That personal interest is key for sticking with it, too.
Because it makes it enjoyable, not a chore.
Exactly. Sustainable learning.
Okay, this makes a lot of sense. Choose content using the 80-20 rule. Start simple. Progress gradually. Now, you mentioned earlier, there are different ways to engage with this content: active and passive immersion.
Yes, that's the next crucial layer. Once you've got your content, how you watch or listen matters enormously. There are two main modes, serving different but equally important neurological functions: active immersion and passive immersion.
Okay, active and passive.
And understanding how to use both, how they work together, that's really where the biggest breakthroughs seem to happen. It's where the lazy method really shows its power.
All right, let's break them down. What's active immersion? Sounds intense.
It is, in terms of focus. Active immersion means exactly what it sounds like: giving your complete, undivided, laser-focused attention to the content.
So, no distractions.
Zero distractions. Phone away, no scrolling, no other tabs open, no emails pinging. You're fully present, mentally engaged. You're consciously soaking in the sounds, the visuals, the expressions, the context.
Trying to understand as much as possible.
Yes, consciously allowing your brain to process all that rich input. Make those initial connections between sound and meaning. Build those recognition patterns. It's the focused absorption phase. Deep work, but with TV.
Okay, so that's active. What about passive immersion then? That sounds more like the lazy part.
Maybe, but it's incredibly valuable for a different reason. Passive immersion is when you let the language play in the background while you're doing other things.
Like while working out,
Hmm.
or cooking, or driving.
Exactly. Gym,
Yeah.
chores, cooking, commuting. Any activity where your main focus isn't on the audio, but it's still there.
What's the point of that if you're not really paying attention?
It serves a different, more subconscious neurological purpose. Even when you're not actively listening to every word, your auditory system is still picking up the rhythm, the intonation, the common sound patterns, the flow of the language.
Ah, so it's like getting the music of the language.
That's a great way to put it. Your brain continues to process these patterns subconsciously. It helps solidify your implicit feel for the language's structure and sound. It's like bathing your brain gently and continuously in the target language.
Interesting. So it reinforces things without conscious effort.
Yes. But, quick caveat here, a neurological reality check.
Okay.
Passive immersion doesn't work while you're sleeping.
Ah, darn. No learning fluent French in my dreams then.
Afraid not. Your brain doesn't process new external information like language input during sleep in the
Right.
same way. Sleep is vital for consolidating memories, yes, but not for initial input acquisition like this.
Okay, good to know. No point leaving the TV on all night.
Right. So we have active for focused learning, passive for subconscious reinforcement. How do they work together?
Yeah, you said the combination was key.
This is the real secret sauce that our guide discovered. The breakthrough came from ingeniously combining both.
How did they do it?
Their method was this. First, they would actively watch new content. Give it their full attention, that active immersion session. Let the conscious brain make those first vital connections: sound, meaning, context.
Okay, the focus part.
Then, right after that active session, or maybe over the next day or two, they would replay that exact same content several times while doing other things.
Ah, so passive immersion, but with stuff they'd already actively watched.
Exactly. Replaying material they had already seen and at least partially understood.
That sounds really efficient.
It's incredibly efficient. This repeated exposure, moving from focused attention to background processing of the same material, it cemented the patterns in their brain remarkably well, and crucially, it didn't require carving out extra study time.
Because they were using time they were already spending on cooking or commuting anyway.
Precisely. Transforming that previously dead time into valuable reinforcement time. Our guide described it like their brain was constantly reviewing and strengthening those neural pathways with each repetition almost effortlessly.
It's like a natural, enjoyable form of spaced repetition.
That's exactly what it is.
Yeah.
But it feels completely organic and integrated into your day, not like another chore.
Okay, this active-passive combo with repetition sounds powerful.
Yeah.
It's already quite different from just reading a textbook. But I think you mentioned something even more controversial.
Yes. Prepare yourself, because this is where the neurological alignment method really diverges from almost everything else out there. It gets truly controversial for a lot of learners and even some teachers.
Uh-oh. What is it?
The recommendation is minimal speaking, especially at the beginning.
Minimal speak. Wait, what? Don't speak.
For a significant period, yes. Engage in minimal output practice.
Is the whole point to speak the language? Every course, every app says, speak from day one. Don't be afraid.
I know. It flies directly in the face of almost all conventional wisdom. The method specifically recommends minimal output until you've accumulated somewhere around 300 hours or so of quality input time.
300 hours of input before you really start trying to speak much. That sounds radical. What?
It sounds radical, but there's a very specific and I believe very logical neurological reason behind it.
Okay, I need to hear this logic.
The rationale is this. Your brain needs time to build strong recognition patterns first. It needs to create a robust internal model of the language, how it sounds, how sentences are built, the common phrases, the rhythm, the intonation, before production, before speaking, can become natural and fluent.
So build the understanding foundation first.
Exactly. Think about that baby again. How long do they spend just listening? Months, maybe a year or more, just absorbing, processing sounds, meanings, context. They're building this massive internal database.
They don't start speaking in full sentences immediately.
Not at all.
Okay.
Their brains are meticulously constructing the entire linguistic architecture before they try to produce complex output. When you force speaking too early, before that foundation is solid,
You're trying to pull from an empty database.
or at least a poorly organized one, you haven't formed the strong connections needed for spontaneous speech. And that leads directly to the hesitation, the translation, the frustration we talked about. You actually end up reinforcing bad habits, awkward phrasing, because you're trying to construct sentences based on incomplete knowledge.
Okay, that makes a strange kind of sense. Input before output. But what happens when you do start speaking after those 300 hours? Isn't it incredibly difficult?
That's the truly surprising part. The magical outcome, according to this method and the experience of those who've used it, is that when you finally do start speaking, the words flow much, much better than you'd expect.
Really? After being mostly silent?
Yes, because those language patterns, those neural networks, have been deeply embedded in your procedural memory through all that input. You're not trying to consciously recall rules from your declarative memory anymore.
Your language muscle memory takes over, like the bike riding.
Precisely. Your procedural system kicks in. It bypasses the conscious bottleneck. The language starts to flow more automatically.
Okay, but surely it can't be perfect immediately.
Oh, definitely not perfect. And our guide is very clear about this. When you first start outputting after this extended input phase, it might feel a bit slow initially, maybe a little clunky.
Like warming up a coal engine.
Good analogy. A bit of sputtering, perhaps, but, and this is the crucial bit, they emphatically state that very, very rapidly you realize something amazing is happening.
What's that?
There's no awkward internal translation. There's no mental searching for grammar rules. Instead, you find yourself experiencing something much closer to fluid, spontaneous communication. That initial clunkiness fades quickly.
So the foundation built by input allows for smoother output, even if it takes a moment to get going.
Exactly. And the personal experience shared by our guide is really compelling here. After those hundreds of hours of Mandarin input via TV, when they finally started having real conversations, they were shocked.
Shocked how?
Shocked by how surprisingly smooth it felt. The
Yeah.
right phrases, the correct tones, natural-sounding sentences, they just started emerging, almost without conscious thought. Again, not perfect native-level fluency on day one. Nobody expects that. But their pronunciation and tones were apparently pretty decent for a non-native. And most importantly, they felt far more comfortable and capable of actually communicating than they ever had, using traditional methods that pushed speaking early.
So less struggle, more natural flow right from the beginning of speaking.
Yes. It wasn't about achieving instant perfection, but about reaching a functional level of comfort and capability that made real communication possible and even enjoyable much faster. They weren't practicing errors, they were activating well-formed patterns.
That's a completely different perspective on practice. It's incredible, really. It shows how powerful the brain's absorption capacity is if you just give it the right stuff in the right way.
It really does.
When our guide looked back, they said the biggest breakthrough wasn't about more discipline, right? It was about stopping the fight.
Exactly. Not forcing it. The breakthrough came when they stopped trying to cram the language into their brain through sheer willpower and rote learning and instead just allowed it to enter naturally, effortlessly almost, through strategic, enjoyable immersion.
And the results, well, they literally speak for themselves. It totally flips the script on what study has to mean.
Absolutely. And that's the core benefit, isn't it? By working with your brain's wiring, not against it, language learning transforms. It stops being this constant draining struggle.
And it comes.
Something remarkably easy, even genuinely enjoyable. You escape that feeling of pushing a boulder uphill, that sense you're just not good at languages.
Which so many people feel.
So many. This isn't just about being more efficient, though it is. It's about changing the whole experience, making it sustainable, pleasurable even,
So it stops feeling like annoying homework you have to force yourself to do.
and becomes something you actually look forward to. Maybe it's how you unwind at the end of the day watching a show you enjoy that also happens to be making you fluent,
That sounds like a much better deal.
doesn't it? So when we talk about strategic entertainment immersion, this 80-20 rule, the active-passive combo, even the minimal speaking phase, it might sound lazy or like cutting corners,
Yeah, the lazy label might make people feel guilty.
but it's not cutting corners at all. Based on the neuroscience, based on the results people are seeing, it's actually the opposite. It seems to be the most direct, most efficient, most brain-friendly path to real fluency.
Bypassing all the frustrating struggles of the old ways.
Exactly. It harnesses that incredible innate power for language acquisition that your brain already has, the same power that let you master your first language without ever cracking a grammar book.
Wow. What an incredible deep dive. It really makes you rethink years of struggle, doesn't it? That feeling of failure so many of us have had with languages, it really just boils down to that fundamental shift. Stop fighting your brain. Work with it.
Let it do what it does best.
Yeah. Change from struggle and willpower to enjoyment, absorption, natural learning in context. Maybe this whole conversation has given you, listening, a totally new perspective, a new way to approach that language you want to learn, or maybe even revisit one you gave up on.
Maybe it's the permission you needed to try a different way.
It could be the permission to be lazy and actually succeed.
And you know, this whole deep dive into language learning, it kind of sparks a broader question, wasn't it? Something to think about beyond just languages.
Oh, what's that?
Well, it makes you wonder, where else in your life might you be fighting against your own natural inclinations? Where else might you be trying to force a skill or learn something complex using sheer grit and maybe outdated, inefficient methods?
Huh. Interesting. Like trying to learn an instrument by only reading theory, maybe?
Could be. Or mastering a sport, developing a creative skill, even tackling complex stuff at work. Is it possible that in other areas too, a seemingly lazy or counterintuitive approach, one that actually aligns with how your brain wants to learn and work, could be the most efficient, effective, and honestly most enjoyable path to mastery?
Are you fighting your brain or are you flowing with it? That's a really powerful thought to end on, something definitely worth reflecting on.
Food for thought, definitely.